Democratic nominee Joe Biden reacted forcefully to reports that the president disparaged fallen soldiers, calling it sick and deplorable. The former vice president was scheduled to speak Friday on the latest jobs report, but he also addressed the recent article in The Atlantic that claims President Trump referred to fallen U.S. service members as losers. The president has denied those claims. Ed O'Keefe reports.
An irate Joe Biden called the president's reported comments disgusting and un-American.
If these statements are true, the president should humbly apologize to every Gold Star mother and father and every Blue Star family that he's denigrated and insulted. Who the heck does he think he is?
Biden himself never served in uniform, but his late son, Beau, did.
When my son volunteered and joined the United States military as the Attorney General and went to Iraq for a year, he wasn't a sucker. The servicemen and women he served with, particularly those who did not come home, were not losers.
The former vice president originally planned to focus Friday just on the economy, but said the president's remarks made him the closest he's come to losing his temper on the campaign trail.
I think there are a lot of people out there who are supporting you or inclined to not vote for the president who would say, why isn't Joe Biden angrier about all of this?
Getting down in the gutter like the president does, saying things that I'd be inclined if we were behind a barn somewhere would be a different thing. But that's not the job of a president.
Mail-in voting kicked off in the key swing state of North Carolina on Friday with a record 600,000 absentee ballots sent out. The president has consistently attacked voting by mail, and this past week he's urged supporters who do vote by mail to also go to the polls in person.
Send in your early ballot and then go and make sure that ballot is tabulated or counted. And if it's not counted, vote.
How many times does this president have to suggest things and say things where you all don't just write, he's a fraud?
For more on this, I want to bring in Philip Bump. He's a national correspondent for The Washington Post. Philip, talk about this issue and how much it might actually swing support from military families.
That's a great question. It's really something that's sort of hard to measure. I've been looking at polling. It's very hard to actually poll active duty members of the military. It's much easier to poll veterans because there are a lot more of them that will be at home responding to calls. So it's hard to say in general. I think the real threat to President Trump here is that there will be a decreased enthusiasm for going out to vote for him. I don't think that anyone who is currently skeptical of President Trump will see this report as somehow confirming something they didn't already suspect about him. And I don't think people who are very enamored of President Trump will see this report and take it at face value. I think the real question is, will there be people who view this report and say, you know what, I'm just going to sit this one out because this is just too much of this sort of thing that I've been seeing. And I think that's the real risk for the president.
Well, turnout is essential. In your latest reporting for The Washington Post titled "The Things Americans Are Most Worried About Are the Things They Prefer Biden to Deal With," you get into some of the things that may actually compel people to the polls. Can you tell us what some of these key issues are and why voters are leaning towards Biden on them?
So Gallup every month does a survey and asks Americans what they think is the most important issue facing the country. So back in 2016, when Trump was first running, the issues that came up a lot were things like terrorism, things like immigration. The economy was an issue back then as well. Now what we're seeing, though, is that people are primarily concerned, unsurprisingly, about the coronavirus pandemic. People are also far more concerned about race relations and racism than they are about, say, terrorism or immigration. The economy actually isn't as big an issue for people as you might expect, given the number of people that are out of work. And so because those core issues of Trump's from 2016 are pretty much off the table, plus the issues that people are focused on, race relations, government, people are very worried about government and politicians, which obviously probably doesn't necessarily reflect a lot of confidence in the current president, but also, of course, the pandemic. Those are all things on which Joe Biden is seen as preferable by American voters, and generally by a pretty wide margin in polling.
Now, this was a national poll. Is that right, Philip?
That's right. This is national.
Yeah, and right. So national polls, there's a lot of them that are actually showing right now that Biden has an advantage over President Trump. But you and I both know that national polls are not necessarily an accurate indicator when it comes to Election Day turnout. Can you talk to our voters a little bit more about what's happening in the swing states as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everyone learned in 2000 and relearned in 2016 that we need to look at what the Electoral College is shaping up to be. And there, too, the news is generally pretty good for Joe Biden. After the conventions, there wasn't really much change in a lot of the core swing states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, things along those lines. And there, Biden generally has a pretty big advantage. We are seeing, leads of 6-7 points in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, which are larger than what Hillary Clinton enjoyed in 2016. Obviously, one of the challenges is those polls were not 100% accurate in 2016, which is why people are sort of overestimating Hillary Clinton's chances. This time around, a lot of pollsters have sort of looked at what happened, tried to adjust what they're doing in order to accommodate who they expect to actually come and vote. So absolutely worth a grain of salt. But nonetheless, if you're one of these two candidates, you'd much rather be in Biden's position than Trump's.
Well, one last question for you, Philip. Monday is Labor Day. Usually that's the big kickoff to the final stretch of the campaign. But we know that there's some voters who are already casting their ballots right now. Joe Biden has largely remained in his home in the state of Delaware over the past few months. The campaign says that he's going to actually start traveling again after Labor Day. I'm wondering, with the pandemic, with voters who are inclined towards Biden anyway being less likely to show up at one of these rallies, what does his campaign think that they're going to accomplish by this, and who are they targeting?
Well, one of the main things you want to do, I was actually in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Biden's hometown, the weekend before the 2016 campaign, and Biden had a fairly small event there. But what was there that was important was a ton of local news cameras. And so one of the things that these candidates want to do is they want to make sure that all the local stations are coming out, covering the fact that they're there, that every night on the news there's some surrogate for the campaign or the candidate themselves who's reaching out to people in the area, that the local newspapers, to the extent that they still exist, are writing about their stops as well. The goal is really to do a lot of sit-downs with local radio stations and really saturate the market to the extent that they can. It's less worrying about how many people come up to a large extent than it is simply about making sure that they have a big footprint in that area at that time.
All right, Philip Pump, thank you.
Of course.